Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 4 of our Secure AI series. Today, we're going to be talking about data loss prevention, or DLP. Okay, again, you are all very welcome, and I hope that you learn something new from these videos. The point of these videos is that we talk about the foundations of this technology, we link it together. Okay, and as the series progresses, or as we move on to a season 2, right, we'll be doing more advanced demos, advanced demonstrations. But again, the purpose of these episodes is that you understand the fundamentals and that you can use them going forward to build something of your own or for your own organization as well. So that being said, let's kick off into the agenda. So we're going to talk about what is DLP, why DLP matters, how do we tune our policies, right? And then we're going to tie it all together in a lovely CDX environment or in our CDX demo as well. Okay. So that being said, what is data loss prevention? Okay, so data loss prevention, in my opinion, is the bread and butter, right, for protecting your sensitive information, right? And when I talk about sensitive information, we talk about classifiers, right? As we saw in episode 1 to 3, whether it's a SIT, whether it's an EDM, or whether it's a trainable classifier, okay? The idea is that once we can build a really good classifier, we're happy with the results and we've done the testing, we can then trigger our DLP policy using that classifier, and we can put actions against it, right? Whether we want to block, whether we want to monitor, whether we want to alert, do a tooltip, right? A great sort of analogy that I often tell customers is that Purview can be the judge, the jury, or the executioner, okay? You can look at information, right? You can analyze information, and then you can actually decide, right, what actions am I going to put against this information, whether it's being in transit or whether it's being at rest, whether it's being floating around in your organization internally, whether it's being sent from internal to external, external to internal, right? The idea of DLP is that it monitors, detects, and restricts the movement of your sensitive data, okay? And it can be across endpoints, your cloud apps, your emails, networks, right? So any unauthorized disclosure, right? It can prevent that across any platform, okay? Another really, I guess, nice way to sum it up, right, is that it protects your sensitive data wherever it travels across any system, user, or app. Of course, it requires certain configurations. It might require certain data connectors. Okay, not everyone is going to be inside the M365 ecosystem, right? Some people use AWS, some people use external cloud apps, some people have Dropbox. There's loads of different technologies out there, but DLP can still be used to protect your information wherever it goes, okay? And why should we care? Well, I guess the most obvious one is that people do make mistakes, myself included. Okay, everyone makes mistakes. No one's perfect. Okay, and the idea of technology, especially in cybersecurity, and especially now that everyone is using AI, or according to the MIT report, 90% of people are using shadow AI, which will be another conversation we'll have about DLP and how important of a role it's going to play in protecting organizations against AI. But people do make mistakes, okay, and there is accidental and there is intentional, right, data leaks, right? We have to be honest here, right? Insider risk is a real thing, but it's important that we can monitor that sensitive information, whether it's being shared inside or outside the organization, right? And obviously compliance and trust goes hand in hand, okay? So I'm European, right? So in Europe, we have a lot of regulations, right? But there's global regulations as well, but GDPR, the EU AI Act, a bunch of stuff that we have to make sure that as a company or as an organization, we're handling our data responsibly, right? And customers can trust us to handle their data responsibly as well. And the last one, which I've kind of hinted on before as well, the insider risk is real, right? So in my opinion, insider risk is probably the biggest threat when it comes to data leakage, right? Not because there might be a malevolence behind it, but people just make mistakes, right? People who aren't in IT, who aren't in cybersecurity, right, they're going to take the path of least resistance, right? They just want to go in, do their job well, and go home. Okay, they're not thinking about, right, where this data might go or how this data leak might occur, right? And that's why we use technology, right? That's why we upskill. That's what we learn about how we can make everyone's life as easy as possible, okay? Because the last thing we want as cybersecurity professionals is getting a bunch of false positive alerts based off our DLP policies, and we're like, God damn it, like my day has just become a lot longer than it needs to be, okay? But insider risk is something that we have to consider, right? Because it is there and it is a big threat. And how do we use DLP? Okay, so obviously the most important thing is that we can link each episode to this series. Okay, so we start with our classifiers, okay, because this is what's going to trigger our DLP policies against what information we're looking to protect. All right, so again, start off with a SIT, right? If an EDM or a trainable, it's too much work or it's too intimidating, right? You can build a SIT, right? And we're going to do that in future episodes. But the idea is that once we have our classifier, we feed it into our DLP policy, we can then define what information, right, that policy is going to act on. Okay, so we're using those classifiers within our DLP rules, right, to decide what happens if the data is shared or moved. And there's loads of actions which we'll see in our CDX environment momentarily, right? But some basic ones, obviously you can do blocking, you can do encrypting, and you can alert users or alert your SOC team, whoever your team is, in terms of, right, this DLP policy has been triggered, here's why it's been triggered. And then the idea is that we can monitor the alerts in real time. Okay, I'm a big fan when customers purchase a large amount of licensing, right, or they're trying to get to use Purview. The idea is that this technology is here to make our lives easier. Okay, I really don't want to go into a customer and they're already super, super busy, and you're giving them like a year or a 2-year project that they have to figure out by themselves, which is Purview, because Purview can be a very intimidating tool. Okay, but that's what we're here. We're here to learn, we're here to upskill, and we're here to educate ourselves and also educate other people that this is possible, right, once you know the way. So that being said, we're going to kick off into our beautiful CDX environment. Okay, guys, so we are in our CDX environment right now. Okay, as I said before, if you don't have a CDX environment, you can use your own tenant. There's lots of ways that you can get around this, but I'm a big fan of the CDX because we have live data, right? Which is very, very handy for DLP, because we can use tools such as Activity Explorer to monitor, what's happening with our policies and how they're being triggered. So that being said, we're going to kick off into our data loss prevention section. What we need to look at here is that Purview has evolved. Okay, when I first started using Purview, it was an engineer's tool. I was a very big fan of it. Okay, there's a lot of fun stuff that you could do, but it was very intimidating. Okay, so what Microsoft have done, right, and rightly so, is that they've decided to make it more user friendly, right, as the tool evolves. And as the need for the tool evolves as well, right? I would describe Purview as Microsoft's golden boy right now, right? A lot of organizations who are Microsoft heavy are really, really keen to get their hands on it. But what we're looking at here at a very high level, right? The first one being our data stored in connected sources. So this is stuff like our M365 data sources, or if we have to, do any manually, configured sources like our managed devices, the policies can be scoped to those set data sources, right? And then what we're looking below is our network activity, right? Our data in browser network activity. So this is more so our Defender for Cloud Apps piece, but we can use Purview as well to build DLP policies to monitor activity that could be in our, our ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok. So the policies are scoped to cloud apps, and they also apply real-time protection to data in motion. Okay, and that's going to be another episode that we're going to cover on. But just to keep things simple, because I have to stay true to my words, these are fundamentals. We're going to stick with the first one, data stored in connected sources. Yes, that's fine. Okay, so what we're going to do. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to call this policy. Keep it simple. Username /pwd, and we're going to call it for exchange. All right, it's a very, very simple description. This policy protects in exchange brackets user /pwd. Okay, you can call the description whatever you want. So the idea of this policy is that we're going to monitor and we're going to protect usernames and passwords in exchange. Okay. Okay, guys, so what I've done is I've just named this policy, right, username and passwords in exchange. The idea of this policy is it's going to protect or monitor, right, again, the judge, the jury, the executioner, that analogy, right? We can just be the jury for now. We can just monitor and observe usernames and passwords within exchange. So the next section is going to be our admin units. Again, we don't need to worry about this section for now, right? We're just going to skip on to locations, but you can assign admin units to certain policies, and they're made in Entra ID, and they can restrict the policy to a specific set of users or groups, okay, if you want to be a bit more tailored. But we can always run these in simulation mode as well, because as I said before in the Train with Classifiers episode, Purview is very good at letting you test, right? It's making sure that things are refined, no users are impacted, but it depends on how you want to do it. So quite important, okay? I think a lot of people get confused with DLP here, more so just kind of wondering where to scope their policies. I like to do an individual technology. The reason I like to do an individual technology is that in a DLP policy, which we'll see in a moment, we have rules, right? And rules have certain actions. However, each action can be unique to a specific technology, right? So there's certain actions or there's certain conditions that we can apply it into a DLP policy for our exchange, but we can't do it for our SharePoint sites, and we can't do it for our OneDrive accounts, and we can't do it for our teams, devices, etc., etc., right? So we'll lose certain actions if we pick everything, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to turn off each of these, and we're just going to focus on Exchange for now. And again, if you guys find this interesting, we can do an individual video about, when to scope each policy to what technology. And we have a lovely new feature as well, which I'm a big fan of, which is our Microsoft 365 Copilot and using DLP to protect information that might be feeding into that, which again, I have another video coming soon on that as well. So we'll go next here, and we're going to customize our advanced DLP rules, and we're going to make a rule. And again, the rule guys in a DLP policy can be a bit confusing to people, right? Because they're like, well, I'm making a policy and I'm also making a rule. So why am I making a rule? The rule just tells the policy what to do, right? So the most important thing that we're looking at here when it comes to So the most important thing, guys, that we're looking at here when we're creating a rule is that we don't want to overcomplicate things, okay? We have a clear set of deliverables that we want the rule to have so that the policy can trigger correctly, okay? So the name, I'm just going to call this PWD USR trigger rule, okay? And the conditions then, so again, we think about episode 1, okay? We think about episode 2, episode 3, right? What do we want our DLP policy? What information do we want it to trigger on? Okay, so we have a load of options here, right? There's so much. But what we're going to do is we're going to click on content contains, right? Group name, you can leave it as default. It's just, again, naming conventions. It's really up to the discretion of the customer. So what we have here, right? Well, we recognize 2 of these, right? We have our sensitive info types and we have our trainable classifiers, okay? Sensitivity labels, we can also add to our DLP policies, which will be the episode coming Saturday. But let's focus on our sensitive info types. Okay, so if you guys remember from episode 1, we have all these beautiful sensitive info types. Some are good, some are bad, right? Your custom ones that you make, right, will also appear here. But because we want to protect usernames and passwords in Exchange, if I just type out USR, right, we have the user login credentials. Now, again, I said it in episode 1, I'm a big fan of this, right? It's not perfect, right? But in terms of out of the box and the stuff that Microsoft have developed, it's quite good at picking up on, what it says on the tin. Obviously, there's going to be different use cases, and I always encourage people when we are looking at DLP and we are looking at SITs to build our own, because that's how you get the most tailored approach, right? But for this example, we're going to use user login credentials. Again, we can do enter user credentials. There's lots we can do here. So we're just going to add in this one. Okay, so we've added in our user login credentials. We have it at medium confidence. I'm going to put it at high confidence because I quite like this one. But again, it is at the discretion of every customer. And again, in episode 1, we talk about confidence levels as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to actions. So we can see here, guys, there's loads. Okay, we're in Exchange, right? And there's lots of stuff that we can do. We could even start Power Automate workflows, which are really, really cool. And again, a new episode will be coming on that. But for now, what we're going to do is talk about restrict access or encrypt the content to our M365 locations. Okay, now it does what it says on the tin. It's just blocking users from receiving email or accessing SharePoint or OneDrive or Teams files. Now, again, because we've only scoped this to our Exchange, right, it's only going to apply to Exchange, okay? So we can block everyone. We can block people outside the organization. What I like to encourage people, okay, and again, we can run this in simulation mode if you guys want to, but you don't necessarily need to put actions into a DLP policy in order to surface and monitor the information. Okay, we always see it in Activity Explorer, which I'll show you again after we make this policy. But Purview is very, very good at giving you that option. Okay, so for now we'll just do block everyone. Okay, because we're super confident that this is going to pull back all the information that we wanted to pull back because we've tailored it and we've done all the actions we need hypothetically. Okay, when you guys add your custom SIT, you've done the testing. You've done you've uploaded a file and you've seen how it works in real time. So it's really, really important that you are very confident whatever SIT you're adding into the DLP policy is going to work. Fucking fly. Okay, so use notifications then. This is quite a nice one. And again, it falls back to the analogy of the judge, jury, the executioner. Okay, so the action here, right, Purview is being the executioner. Okay, we are saying we're going to block everything with a username and password, right? But if we just delete this, and again, you can use them in combination, right? So you can have an action and you can have a notification, but just to keep it simple. So there's lots of stuff we can do here, right? We can give people email notifications. We can notify the user who sent it or shared it or last modified it, and then we can attach an email to the notification as well. Now this only works for Exchange. I think it's a bit overkill, to be honest with you. What I like to do is policy tips. Okay, so policy tips are a great way of letting your users know that they're breaching a DLP policy without disrupting their workflow. So the biggest thing about DLP and classification and any form of security or data security is that we cannot disrupt people's normal workflow. Okay, it's our responsibility when we're building these policies, when we're educating people on this technology and educating ourselves, that we do it as seamless as possible, right? And it's almost running in the background and people don't even notice it. Okay. Just to recap on our policy, okay, because again, just conscious there's a lot there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the policy. So this is a DLP policy. We've made a rule. We're going to add our user login credentials saying that, okay, I only want this policy, first of all, to apply to Exchange, okay, because we scoped it out in the locations, but also the only information or the sensitive info type that I want this policy to look at is our user login credentials. Okay, so we've done that here, content contains, okay. If we move on to actions, we've decided, right, we want to block everyone from sending anything that has our user login credentials, right, or that contains the type of content that we're looking to protect, okay? And then again, with our user notifications, what we've done is we've decided, right, we notify the user who've sent or shared, right, the email containing our user login credentials. We've made a very basic policy tip saying, hi, Johnny, please be aware that this email contains a username and password. We've also allowed the user to override just in case they feel like that the business, there is a real business need to get this out there. And then the incident reports, obviously, we haven't done anything here, but this is more so just setting up an alert group so that they can see, all right, these DLP alerts, what's happening, who's sending it, who's receiving it, why did this policy trigger, is it a true positive, is it a false positive? Okay, so very, very basic setup. But again, guys, with DLP, we can get advanced or we can get as basic as we want to, okay? And as the episodes progress, as I always say, we will be doing more advanced demos and seeing real-time action in terms of a DLP policy working. So we'll go next here. And we will just run it in simulation mode, right? Again, it's a CDX environment. It doesn't really matter, but I always like to run it in simulation mode. And a good learning from this as well, guys, when you have an action on a policy, I don't care how much work you've done with the SIT, right? Or how much you know about DLP, you should always run it in simulation mode, okay? Let it run for a couple of days, okay? It will take a couple of days just to kind of get kicked off anyway, right? And then you can turn it on, okay? You can turn it on after 15 days as well if you want to automatically, but always run it in simulation mode. Never take the risk of impacting the end user to the point where they get disrupted and they can't do their job, and then poor IT or poor cybersecurity team is getting phone calls or tickets left, right, and center saying fix this. Okay, so always run it in simulation mode. So we're just going to hit next on this and submit this, and we should see a nice green tick at the end. Okay, so the policy is updated. And what I want to show you guys before the video ends as well, very, very quickly, is our Activity Explorer. Okay, so I mentioned this before about how we can, view the information that or view the DLP policy and the information within the policy and how it's, interacting with our environment. Okay, so if I briefly go to files containing sensitive info types, the location, I don't think Exchange will be here. It'll probably just be some other, yes, we have SharePoint. Let's see if we can get just another technology up there. Again, guys, when you make a DLP policy, don't expect it to appear straight away in Activity Explorer. So we have a bit more information here. So see if there's a OneDrive or something. Brilliant. So we have a OneDrive here. So we're going to apply this, right? And we're going to just see what sensitive info types are out here. So we have credit card numbers, just some basic GDPR stuff as well. So we have credit card number as an example. And again, I just want to show you how you can filter this out and how you can look for certain information. So if we pick any one of these, right, and we just hit this credit card number here. So we can see Visa, and then we have the credit card number hit with a US bank account number as well. Again, this will look different for every organization, but the idea is that Purview is very good, right? So these are our DLP rules matching, okay? We can see the activity, we can see it when it happened. We have the record ID, we have the file. We can actually view the source of the file as well, which is quite cool, just depending on what role you have, right? Because Purview is very role reliant. And again, I'm working off a single monitor here, so it looks kind of weird, but you will have a different view in terms of your monitor setup. We can see the actual source document. We have the Visa number here as well, which is really, really cool. We can see the size, the policy that it triggered on, right? And then we can see the location as well, right? It was in some fake OneDrive, and this is the parent as well in terms of the file path we can see, okay? So a lot of information here. We get the metadata, and Purview is quite detailed in that. And of course, we can export all of these results as well. But again, if you want a separate video on Activity Explorer and how we can monitor it and how we can actually get the most out of it, I'm more than happy to do it. Just please let me know and we can get it done. All right, guys, that sums up our data loss prevention video. Again, we're just talking about the foundations, okay, and how we can link our SITs, our classifiers, okay, into our DLP policies, how we can define certain actions, how we can scope it to certain locations, how we can set up policy tips so that we're not annoying our users and preventing them from doing work, okay? So I really hope you enjoyed the video. I really hope you took some learnings from it, and stay tuned for our next video where we cover classification. Thank you very much.